Hello and welcome to Cinema Chat. Cinema Chat's the podcast where we talk about the movies and the people that made them. And today I have a special guest on the show. I'm going to be talking with Karen Burroughs-Hansberry about the 1944 film Double Indemnity, one of my favorites. And hi, Karen. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me, David. It's my absolute favorite noir, so I am very excited to be here talking about it today.
It's definitely an exciting show. Now, Karen, you promote a page called the Dark. What is it called again?
Actually, it's a newsletter. It's a bi-monthly newsletter that comes out. It's called The Dark Pages. And it is in both hard copy and electronic. This is our 15th year of publication. And it comes out every couple of months. And then at the end of the year, we put together a giant issue. Most of the issues are 8 pages. Sometimes they're 12 or 16. But at the end of the year, we put together a giant special issue that focuses on one particular area. Mm-hmm. So like this year's giant issue that comes out in December is going to focus on the noir, the big heat. And so the newsletter is all about film noir. And, anything you ever want to know about noir, you can get it in the Dark Pages. And so we also have an accompanying, Facebook page and Twitter, but the newsletter is the main thing.
Okay. And let me first ask you, you're obviously well versed in the noir. Let me ask you, what exactly are the components that make a noir? Noir, because when I say things like when I've said things to people before, mentioned that I think Key Largo, with Bogey and Bacall is a little bit of a noir because it's pretty dark and nobody's really perfectly likable except Lionel Barrymore in the movie. But what I'm wondering is, what all components need to be there to make a noir?
Well, one thing about noir is it's very subjective. I mean, there are some noirs like Double Indemnity or Laura or, The Killers. I mean, the list goes on that are unmistakably noir. And then there are movies like Key Largo, for instance, that some people say they're noir and some people say they're not. And there's no definitive answer. And I don't personally believe that there is a list of characteristics that every noir has. There are components, though, that are common to many noirs. For instance, many noirs, if not most of them, have an urban setting, and many of them have voiceover narration and flashbacks. Many of them have a femme fatale. Many of them have a conflicted anti-hero who's often a cop or a private detective. And also, in addition to the characters, noirs are known for having these distinctive camera angles and a lot of use of mirror reflections, lots of shadows, and shots of rainy nights and flashing neon lights. But out of all those characteristics, every noir doesn't have to have them all, and every film that has them isn't necessarily noir. And so I think that one primary characteristic that almost every noir has is just a feeling of doom. It's that sensation that something bad is going to happen, things are not going to turn out well, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. And beyond that, you can build on it with take some components here, take some characteristics there, but it's that feeling that's at the core of film noir to me.
I think that's the best description anyone could have ever come up with, because I have gotten in so much hot water by telling people that I think Key Largo is I've covered it on this podcast, but I did not call it a noir on the podcast. I was very careful not to say that. But when I've hinted with people that it's somewhat noir, it's like they get so frustrated with me. But when you said several things that would make me believe that maybe Maybe indeed it is not. Maybe it's just a little bit of a high drama. But we did not come on here to talk about Key Largo as much as I love that film. We came to talk about Double Indemnity, directed by the great Billy Wilder. And, Karen, let me say something, and then I'll let you expound on it. I feel like Billy Wilder is, along with Hitchcock, the one of the two best directors of the middle of the century. We have, the early part with, all the great, the studio directors, and I think there's questions to be asked on how great some of those studio directors were. But then we get to the middle of the century where these guys are getting they're more auteurs, and they're deciding things on their own. The studio has a little less input, or even a lot less input. I think with Double Indemnity, there's probably a little bit more input from the studio, but because Billy Wilder was just kind of getting started. Where do you fit Billy Wilder in with the great directors?
I think that really he's right up there at the top. When I was looking over his body of work, it was just one classic, excellent film after another. I mean, of course, Double Indemnity is up there at the top, but when you look at movies like The Lost Weekend and Stalag 17 and Witness for the Prosecution, then some of his later comedies, The 7-Year Itch, Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, and not to mention another one of my favorite noirs, which it wasn't a hit when it came out, but it's been really critically acclaimed since, and that's Ace in the Hole with Douglas. I mean, it's just like everything he touched almost seemed to turn to gold. Even the ones that I'm not mentioning. There's so many. You can't even name them all. So he just really had something that was just superb. He was really outstanding. Yeah,
it wasn't until Buddy all the way into the 80s where he had anything that didn't do great.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a really great director, and I just think he's outstanding. And of course, the film stars Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, and we've got the great Edward G. Robinson, who I normally like to get into the acting part of it a little later, but first I want to say Edward G. Robinson, this was just a fantastic moment for him. He had some roles earlier, and I think he was a little bit. Am I right in thinking he didn't really want to be in this film because he wasn't the star?
Right. He was looking at it like, he was what he was just a supporting character. And he didn't like, playing the third lead. But he had to look at his own career, and I don't want to speak for, Mr. Robinson, but, he was at that kind of transitional phase. He was no longer, it wasn't the 30s. He wasn't, the gangster, and the headliner. But he also realized that he was getting paid as much as Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray were, so that, that practical, aspect kind of played into it, and he just did such a standout job. It was, of course, it was a supporting role, but he is so memorable and so extraordinary in that role that it was perfect for him. He was perfect for Ed.
Yeah, he was just outstanding, and one of the most underrated actors, and it says a lot because I think people put him and put him really far up there, but I think he's still one of the most underrated actors of Hollywood history. And of course, Fred McMurray. Let's talk about him and how this was a little bit of a departure for him. What do you think about his character and the way he gave it?
I love that he was even cast in the movie, because when you look at most of the films that he did up to then, it was these light-hearted, Claudette Colbert, Carole Lombard features, and he was just such a likable, amiable guy in these movies, and who would even imagine that he would be able to play a character like this? But but Billy Wilder. He was just outstanding. And it's funny because that, not only did Edward G. Robinson not want to play his part, Fred McMurray didn't want to play his part either.
Right.
He said he was just a saxophone player, and he could do a little comedy, but he thought his career was going to be ruined by this. And Wilder, actually talked him into it, and as it turned out, Fred McMurray later considered the film and the role to be one of his favorites, and you can see why, because he just was just so excellent in it.
Yeah, it was a pivotal role for him, I feel, because he was playing it safe for so long, or for years. He played it safe with these movies that where the kind of the female was really a bigger star, and then all of a sudden he gets this role, and it was just very pivotal. And then of course we've got Barbara Stanwyck, and we should talk about. Well, before we get to Barbara Stanwyck, let's go back to Fred McMurray with the opening scene where, of course, he's playing Neff, and he's confessing. So we're not giving anything away here. He's confessing to murder at the very beginning of the film. What do you think about the beginning? How it starts, and Wilder's decision to do it that way?
I absolutely, well, first of all, I hope that I'm not going to say this too much, but I absolutely love the way the movie starts, and I absolutely love everything about it, so you may hear that again, but the way it begins, it grabs you from the very first second, first the music, and then seeing this car careening through the streets of LA, running red lights, and narrowly avoiding accidents, and you automatically want to know what is going on, who is in that car, what's happening, and what's happening is this guy who gets out and hobbles his way on in this building, and you don't know what's wrong with him, but you know that something's wrong with him. And when he sits down and we finally get to see his face, and he's sweating, and for some reason he's only using one arm to do everything.
Right.
And then we find out when he starts speaking into the dictaphone, we find out exactly what's the matter with him. And I just love it. It just grabs you from the very, very beginning, and it just never lets you go.
No, that's what I was gonna say. It never lets loose of the grip until it says the end.
The very end.
Oh yes, yeah. And of course, after that, we've got the famous stairway towel scene with Barbara Stanwyck, and what do you? There's instant sexual attraction, tension, however you want to put it, but it's just there. What's your take on that scene?
When Fred McMurray gets to the house and kind of pushes his way past the maid to talk about this auto renewal that he's trying to get, and Phyllis appears at the top of the steps just wearing this towel.
Yeah.
And the look on Walter's face when he sees her is, I've looked at him so often, and to me it's kind of like the combination of a blushing schoolboy and a dirty old man. It's just like his face is just, consumed with her, and he's trying to make jokes, trying to be funny, saying, it would be a shame if she got into an accident and wasn't fully covered. And when she says that she was sunbathing, he's saying, hope there were no pigeons. So he's trying to be, this, jovial kind of guy and appealing. And to me, while he's trying to impress her, we get a close-up of her face, and to me, her face has got this kind of appraising look in her eye, like she's sizing him up, like she, like you can see the wheels turning, and she's not even thinking about, she's not going where he's going. She's going someplace else, and he has no idea.
Oh, no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. And, of course, there's the moment where they talk about the speed limit. And the 45 miles.
It's just the best metaphor ever. Every time I hear it, and I have seen this movie so often, in fact, it's on right now. It's just the best. exchange of dialogue.
It just now occurred to me that a movie much later, Fletch with Chevy Chase, where there's a I think that they stole from this a little bit. When you see Chevy Chase walk in and he sees the woman, and I can't think of her name, wearing only the towel, and he says, "Can I borrow your towel? My car just hit a water buffalo." I feel like that they stole from that, and they made it just to a more jovial thing,
right?
And it's kind of funny, but it's true. But I feel like that's just a thing. But anyway, I just really, I think that the tension between these two and the danger that she that comes with her. I mean, she's a married woman, and then instantly they start talking about a murder plot. Talk to us about that. Just a little bit about the plot. What do you think of the whole murder plot?
Well, the plot itself was really pretty simple. With Walter getting Phyllis's husband to take out this accident insurance policy, but he not knowing it, and it having this double indemnity clause, which means that it pays double for certain rare accidents, like an accident aboard a train. And then they have the whole, trip that he planned for his college reunion, and as luck would have it, not for him, but for them, that he broke his leg and had to take the train. And then they have this whole scheme with Walter to impersonate him. I mean, it was really pretty ingenious. Walter really put a lot of thought into this plot, and not just the actual carrying out of the act with them, killing him in the car and planting his body on the tracks. I'm sorry if anybody hasn't seen it, but putting his body on the tracks and him jumping off the train. But all the things that he did before and after to make sure that he had an airtight alibi. I mean, he thought of everything.
Yep.
And yet, like they say with the best laid plans, it still went to the left. But he was really, really smart about the whole thing.
Right.
And, you can't deny that it was a great idea. Sorry, Mr. Dietrichson.
Right. It did seem like a great idea, but of course we've got Barton Keyes who is he's got that feeling in his stomach, and
that's funny too, because he didn't think of everything. There's one thing he didn't think of, and that was that that Mr. Dietrichson had filed a claim when he broke his leg, and that was the key to the whole thing falling apart. Just one thing, and that set the whole house of cards in motion. But it was almost perfect, but he just didn't think of everything.
Yes, yeah. It's kind of funny. There again, I'm thinking of a more modern thought. It's almost kind of like a Columbo episode. Yeah. I mean,
one more thing.
Exactly. And we see well, we don't see, but we know that there's a murder, and we know who did it, and yet we still are riveted by it, and we want to know what clue is going to come forth, and of course, one of the things that I find interesting. Now you described a noir perfectly. What is a noir? You described that perfectly. But what do you think about the darkness of the film? It's one of the darker films you're gonna ever watch.
Do you mean literally or figuratively?
Let's talk about literally first.
Yeah, the cinematographer John Seitz did just such an extraordinary job with this film. And it's funny, when I was preparing to talk to you, I've been watching Double Indemnity over and over and over again. But one thing I never really paid a lot of attention to before the last few days was the cinematography. And if anybody is so inclined, I would highly recommend watching this movie just to pay attention to the lighting, because it's absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
There are so many ways that he uses lights and shadows, and he was known for certain types of effects, like low-key lighting, which meant that he lit the scene with a single light source instead of the more common combination of three, or he would use different lighting in different areas of the screen, like in the foreground, in the background, in the middle, and of course the whole Venetian blinds effects, or they sometimes call it jail bar effect, with light cut into the shadows. And that would go on to be one of the most imitated and recognizable looks in all of film noir. Mm-hmm. And he also, it was just like, there was one scene when Phyllis goes for the first time to see Walter at his apartment, and they go into the kitchen, the little kitchenette, where Walter is making some cocktails. Uh-huh. But then they don't turn the light on, and it's so dark in there that you can't sometimes see their faces, but you can see the whites of Phyllis's eyes. It's like, that's the light. There's light coming from the other room, but in that room, sometimes all you can see are her eyes, and I never noticed that before, and it's just amazing. Just like the opening shot when the car is going through the streets and it's dark outside, but the headlights from the car and the street lights are what are lighting the scene. Uh-huh. And it was just amazing, the things that he did with shadows just all the way through, from the beginning to the end. It was great. It was awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely one of the darker movies cinematically that you're going to watch, but then of course the theme is dark as well, and what's your take on the overall darkness of Double Indemnity?
I think that's probably why, not why, but one of the reasons why I like it so much, because it's just so dark. Sometimes when you have a femme fatale, she's really the focus of the evil, of the badness. But in this, Walter is no slouch in that department either.
No. And
then you even have minor characters, like Lola's boyfriend, or Mr. Dietrichson. He was awful. And it's just, there's so many unredeemable characters in it. I love it, but they're also dark and unsympathetic. And I think that's part of the movie's charm.
Yeah, of course we have the one character who is a sympathetic figure with Lola. You mentioned Lola, and she's the one character that you see in the film that's just, you're just kind of gets. She's really the only character in this film that's like, I take that back. I do like Keyes, but he is no nonsense. That's for sure.
She's definitely more sympathetic. You're really sorry, because the movie, the way it's presented to me, kind of makes you root for the killers sometimes. Just like after they dump the body on the tracks and they're getting ready to make their getaway, and the car doesn't start. And you really are on the edge of your seat because you really want them to get out there. You don't want them to get caught. I mean, there's moments like that. Translates into, I am on the side of these bad people. I don't want them to fail. But Lola, when she comes in the picture, it's like you just feel so sorry for her and all that she's gone through. And it's just like, well, you can't really root for the bad guys when she's around, because she's just such a shining light of goodness.
Yes, she's lovely, and she played so well as well, but by Jean Heather, just a really it's and I feel like when she's on the screen, that's the only that's not, it's never not dark in the film, but I feel like it's less dark when she's on screen. Am I imagining that?
No, I think that you're right. I think you're right. It's funny though, I think it was her first scene when she was telling her father she was going skating with one of her girlfriends, but and Phyllis is questioning, and she kind of pushes back to her father, and gets kind of smart alecky with him, kind of tart, and he says as she walks out, great little fighter for her weight, like he admires the fact that she is, stands up for herself. So even though she's all sweetness and light, she's no pushover either. So I like that in her.
Yes, that's a good point. Very good point. And I have something to ask you. Now, I've never mentioned it before, but is there a moment where Walter is kind of actually thinking bad thoughts about Lola? Like in other words, does he get sweet on her? Do you think?
Oh, for sure. I think that she is like the complete opposite of Phyllis.
Yes.
And he is drawn to that. It's like she's the good side, and he can't help but, I think at his core, even though Walter planned this murder and carried it out and did all these bad things, and really bad things, they may be at his very, very, inner core, he still has a kernel of goodness in there, and that's what Lola tapped into. And I think that he was not only maybe attracted to her as a female, but that her whole affect, what she brought into his life to counter what he was dealing with her stepmother. I think that he was drawn to that.
Yeah, and I do too. Do you think? Do you think what do you think the dynamic is exactly of the relationship between Walter and Phyllis? Do you think Phyllis ever really had true feelings for him, or is he just a pawn?
Well, she said herself at the end that she never loved him, that she never loved anybody, even though right before she meets her end, I feel like, and I'll always feel that she actually did feel something, that she surprised herself to learn that she really did feel something for him. But I think that from the very beginning and all the way through, I don't think that he meant a thing to her except a means to an end.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think in some way Walter didn't have any true feelings other than just immoral ones, with her, and because Phyllis was married first of all,
right?
And so it's and then you're gonna kill her husband. It's just it's a very bizarre dynamic. For sure. Now, you mentioned something about rooting for the bad guys sometimes, and I of course, one of the particular problems, and it's not really a problem. I think it's actually, well, of course, Billy Wilder thought it was a huge problem. Was the Hays Code, and the reason why I say maybe it really wasn't a problem is because I think that the Hays Code was a time when filmmakers had to be creative to get around it, and
sure.
and we saw, when you look back almost 100 years later at film history, you see the pre-code movies, and we have a good handful of those to look at and admire. But then we have that next set of films, which is all under the Hays Code, and Billy Wilder, of course, is one of the directors that famously helped to destroy the Hays Code. But in this movie, he had to try to get around it. Do you know if they had some problems with getting around the Hays Code?
I think that there were a number of areas that Joseph Green, who was the head of the Production Code Administration, and that's the organization that producers had to submit their films to for approval, and if they didn't get approval of the PCA, then they had to pay this $25,000 fine. And there was a lot of back and forth between Billy Wilder and Joseph Breen with a variety of areas that he objected to, and it was on Billy Wilder to either do what he wanted him to do. Like there were some lines that that Breen objected to, and Billy Wilder ended up changing them. But then there were other areas that Billy Wilder had to use creativity to get around. Like, for instance, of course, the film couldn't explicitly show any sex. And I think to get around this, there's that scene where Phyllis visits Walter in his apartment for the first time. And, in one shot, they're on the sofa kissing, and then you go to a dissolve. And in the next scene, Phyllis is putting her makeup back on, and Walter is kicking back, smoking a cigarette. So, draw your own conclusions, but you didn't have to show, but you know what's going on. And another one with the Breen objected to the details of the murders, and so to get around that, Billy Wilder, instead of showing the murders, they didn't show Walter killing Phyllis's husband.
Okay.
They showed Barbara Stanwyck's face. It was on her face the whole time. And in fact, even when Walter did her in, you saw her face. You didn't see what was going on at all, if you think about it. And so that's how he got around Breen's objection to any kind of grisly, killings. Is that kind of creativity, and it's just as effective, if not more so, because that scene where Barbara Stanwyck is driving the car while her husband is next to her being killed is absolute mastery.
Oh yes, everything about it. I mean, it's so interesting, Karen, how we get from this is one of those films. Am I overstepping and other people's thoughts? But it's one of those films that you don't want to end when it ends. Yeah, it's one of those that's riveting from start to finish. And we've got so many different phases of this film. It's just fantastic. And of course, it was written by Billy Wilder and also Raymond Chandler, and they did not get along, did they?
No, they did not. It's funny, Billy Wilder's usual writing partner was Charles Brackett, and in fact, Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder wrote the first treatment of double indemnity that was submitted to Breen. But according to what I've read, Charles Brackett really thought the whole story was distasteful and really didn't want to work on it. And so then Billy Wilder wanted the author of the novel, James Cain, to collaborate on the screenplay, but he was working on a picture at Fox, so he couldn't do it. And then a friend of Billy's gave him some stories that Raymond Chandler had written for this magazine, this pulp magazine, and he loved the way he wrote, and he brought him on board. But from almost the very beginning, they did not get along. They started getting on each other's nerves, and it was all kinds of things. Raymond Chandler, was an alcoholic, and he got annoyed when Billy Wilder would drink around him, and Chandler would complain that Wilder would wear his hat inside, and Wilder complained that Chandler smokes his pipe all the time and wouldn't open the windows. And then finally Chandler said he just couldn't work with Billy Wilder anymore, and he wrote up a long list of complaints that included things like Billy Wilder had a habit of pointing a cane at him while they worked, or he would give him arbitrary, orders like, fix the Venetian blinds, all kinds of little ticky-tacky stuff. But the producer finally stepped in and smoothed things over. And, in interviews later, both men seem to realistically view the experience, but they also seem to both have a positive spin on it. Like Wilder said that Chandler didn't know anything about movies or how they worked, but he was so good at dialogue and he was peculiar, but he was glad that he worked with him. And Chandler said it was an agonizing experience and probably shortened his life, but that he learned from it about as much about screenwriting as he was capable of learning. And so, they both, kind of backed into some compliments about each other. But I think that maybe that antagonism that they had is maybe what helped make such great scenes and such great language, but they really came up with something extraordinary.
Well, yes, that's true. Karen, I think if everybody got along on a movie set, it wouldn't be a very good movie.
Especially a movie like this,
Yeah. I'm just fascinated. Anytime I talk about Billy Wilder, and I covered Some Like It Hot and also The Apartment when I did one right after the other, and of course the films are so different from each other, and they're so different from this film, and which is what we were talking about with Billy Wilder, is he had this just whatever it was, he had an ability to, and I think, and I'll make a couple people upset. I put him above Hitchcock, because Hitchcock could be humorous, as well as obviously has very suspenseful past, but Billy Wilder could do everything. He maybe couldn't do suspense quite as well as Hitchcock. Nobody could. But Billy Wilder could do everything.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. When you look at a movie like Double Indemnity, and then you look at a movie like Some Like It Hot, and there's a whole world between those two, but they both are just so excellent, and that's what Billy Wilder could do.
Yeah, and when you compare Double Indemnity to the other films, let's just talk about those two, Some Like It Hot and The Apartment. The thing, when you compare those films to this one, they have one thing in common, and that's that there's more than one thing, but they have complex characters that aren't really completely with the exception of Marilyn Monroe and Some Like Hot, they're probably not completely defined, and it's hard really to kind of figure out who they are completely, and I think that his character development was just so great, and I really enjoy Billy Wilder films, as you can probably tell. But yeah, he was just a fascinating director. But going back to the Hays Code thing, of course, rooting for the bad guys, and we couldn't do that. We couldn't see the bad guys succeed in noir movies and in these these Hays Code era movies, because the bad guys had to pay for their prices or pay for their sins, for whatever they did. If they committed a murder or they committed adultery, they must pay for it on the screen. And in some ways, it's just kind of funny how at the time, I'm sure every director felt handcuffed because of the Hays Code. But looking back on it, it's now that we don't have it anymore, it's kind of fun to look at those movies, because it really is. And do you have a favorite scene from Double Indemnity?
Oh, I have several.
Tell me your top three.
I'm gonna move past the towel scene, since we talked about that already. But so I'm gonna fudge along and only have three after that. But the next favorite one I have is the second meeting between Walter and Phyllis, when she calls and tells him to come to the house that her husband is gonna, renew with his company. And it opens with a shot of Phyllis's legs as they come down the staircase. And when Phyllis opens the door, Walter is leaning against the door with this, super casual, super nonchalant, breezy, with this, silly grin on his face. It's just so funny just to see him, and especially when you find out how the scene ends, he certainly didn't get what he expected. But I just love this web that Phyllis spins for Walter by, first of all, acting like she forgot it was her maid's day off.
Yes.
And then putting on this act of the concerned wife when she's trying to get accident insurance without her husband finding out about it. And I love this look of uneasiness that starts to creep in Walter's eyes when he first starts to realize what Phyllis is really up to. And when he asks her point blank, you want to knock him off, don't you? And she's all shocked and filled with righteous indignation, and actually Walter is kind of amused at how she thought that he was a fool, that she thought that she could just toss him this line and that he was just going to fall all over himself to do what she wanted him to do. And as it turned out, he did. But in that scene, it was great because he was like, I'm not having it. I see what you're up to, and I'm out of here. I'm glad I'm not your husband, You're swell, but,
Yeah, you're swell.
I gotta go. And I just love how the whole scene plays out, especially, from beginning to end, how, he thought he was gonna get something, and he certainly got more than he bargained for, that's for sure. And that's my first favorite. And then my second, I think, is probably the scene where it's the first of two scenes. No, I'm trying to think which of these come first. Yeah, it's the first of the only two scenes where Phyllis, Walter, and Keyes are in the same scene. And this one is where the president of the insurance company calls Walter and Keyes into his office to tell them that he knows that Dietrichson's accident was no accident, that it was suicide. And then a few minutes later, Phyllis arrives, and she and Walter have to act like they don't know each other, and she, explodes, with this, great anger when Norton, the president of the company, tells her his theory about it being suicide. And then after she leaves, Keyes launches into this just absolutely outstanding speech to tell his boss how this man could not have possibly committed suicide. And it's just this nonstop delivery by Edward G. Robinson. It's just riveting. The whole scene is. But the way he does that whole speech is just, it's remarkable. But I love that scene. And then my last favorite is like the showdown between Walter and Phyllis, which starts with this shot from above where Phyllis is kind of setting the stage for Walter to arrive, and so she unlocks the front door and turns out all the lights like Walter told her to, and then she plants a gun, under the cushion of the chair she's going to be sitting in, and she just settles into it to wait for Walter, like she's waiting for him to come to tea or something. And I also like, this is another effect that John Sykes did. If you notice, when Walter opens the door, you see his shadow enter the house before he does. And I just really like that effect. It's really brief, but it's effective. And when Walter comes in and sits on the arm of the sofa opposite Phyllis, which is exactly the same position that he sat across from her when he first came to her house. But in the original one, the room was full of light and sun, and now it's dark, and I think that's really effective too. And the fact that Walter is all smiling and sarcastic as he basically tells Phyllis that he's getting ready to kill her. The whole scene is just one riveting moment after another. And Phyllis is completely unfazed. She doesn't show any fear. She just shoots Walter, and then comes that moment that for her is too little too late, when she seems to realize that maybe she does feel something for this guy after all, and that's why she couldn't finish him off. But, like I said, it was too late for that revelation, and she had to bite the dust. So that's my favorite three.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because the scene where where we see Keys, we see Keys and Phyllis and Walter all in the vicinity of Walter's apartment, and where we see Phyllis is like behind the door. And you know, there are a lot of films, probably thousands of films, that would be the best scene in that particular film, and this one, maybe it's number 7, 8, 9, you know, and it's just, that's a riveting
There's so
scene.
many.
Yeah.
It really is. It's so suspenseful.
Yeah.
You know.
It is. It's so great, and that's definitely one of my favorite scenes in any film, but yet it's not even close to the best scene in Double Indemnity. It's just it's such a great.
It's another great scene.
Yeah. Hats off to everybody involved. And I failed to mention earlier. I wanted to talk about the music. I was trying to attach that to the cinematography, and I kind of got lost there. I would definitely be remiss we didn't talk about Miklos Rosa. His score was just fantastic. Exactly what this film needed.
It was perfect.
Yeah, and the guy he scored a couple other films for Billy Wilder, including The Lost Weekend, I believe, and
5 Graves to Cairo.
Yes, that's right. I was trying to remember the other one. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and just overall great film. Every aspect of this film is on point, and of course it's got 7 Academy Award nominations and got shot down with every single one. And
I can see, you know, when I was looking at the list, Ingrid Bergman won for Best Actress over Barbara Stanwyck, and I could kind of, you know, definitely see an argument for that, because Ingrid Bergman was superb in that role. But Best Picture and Best Director and Best Cinematography and Best Score, come on, you know, it's really, I just don't know what they were thinking about. And for Going My Way to be the movie that beat them in so many categories, and I don't know if this is true, I certainly hope it is, but I read that when Leo McCarey, the director of Going My Way, went on his way up to the stage to collect his Oscar, that Billy Wilder tripped him.
yes,
and I just love the idea. Like, I don't know. You know, I don't know if there's any footage of that, but I really hope that that's what happened.
Yes, that's right. That's right. He did. I think he claimed that he did, didn't he?
I think so.
Yeah,
it certainly is in all the resources. You know.
Yeah,
so I like it.
It's just, cantankerous man. I love it. Love that guy. But you know, as much as I appreciate Leo McCarey, of course, he directed one of the better comedies of all time, Duck Soup. But you know, I should have given an Academy Award for that, not for Going My Way. Yeah. How many times have we said this in Oscar history, though, where people win and lose awards, and you're going, how did this happen?
Right.
You know, and when we see things in retrospect, again, like I mentioned, Hays Code movies, all the Hays Code era movies, they all had obstacles that they had to come across, and some people probably didn't care. Some directors didn't care, but directors like Billy Wilder, this was a big freaking deal, you know. It was like he probably really felt hamstrung, but in retrospect, you know, we have to appreciate as cinephiles the types of all the different types of films that we have that they have to offer. But let's see. I think I wish it would have won for Best Picture and Best Director. I think that's those should have been givens. Those should have been givens. But
and Best Score. I mean, I want to say too about Miklos Rosa that when he did 5 Graves to Cairo, that was his first movie with Billy Wilder. and it was another Paramount production, and the head of Paramount's music department, this guy named Louis Lipstone, didn't like his musical style, but Billy Wilder did. And then the next year, when Rosa got the assignment to score Double Indemnity, Louis Lipstone again was saying that, Billy Wilder isn't going to like this, and, when he hears it, he's going to remove it from the picture, and the music wasn't attractive. And Rosa was like, look, this is supposed to reflect the actions of the characters. And at the preview of the movie, according to what I read, Wilder and Charles Brackett and the studio head were all praising the music. And then this Louis Lipstone tells them, oh, don't I always get you the right man? So he's, downing Rosa's music through the whole process. But when he realized that everybody, all the head guys liked it, then he's like, oh, yeah, it was my idea the whole time, So I thought that was really ironic.
Yeah, and, the classic boss.
I would love to listen to Since You Went Away, because of course Max Steiner, who won for that, Max Steiner is a huge stellar talent, but I would like to watch that again just to listen to the music and see what I think, because I just can't imagine that it's better than what he did in Double Indemnity.
No, and Max Steiner, I might even put, I'd have to think about it for a few minutes, but I might put him, we'll bring it down to just middle of the century. I'd say Max Steiner probably, almost unquestionably, is the best, but not this particular film. It doesn't beat this one. Nothing Max Steiner did beats this one, and it's just so unfortunate. It really is. But the good news is that we still have it available to watch, and amongst all of the lovely lost films, of the first part of the century, we still have this one, and it's so great, and there's so many things to like about it. Karen, I really appreciate you coming on, and will you talk to us again about Dark Letters, and I want you to send me a link to it so I can post it and everybody can subscribe to it. But tell us a little bit more about what you're trying to do with that.
Well, the Dark Pages is kind of our tagline is, everything you love about noir. It's everything about noir and more. So it's every issue has reviews of movies, profiles of actors and actresses. We have trivia, quotes, lots of photos. We have contests. We have quizzes. We have our senior writer, Christina Dion, who has a blog called Speakeasy, does a crossword puzzle now. So that's a new feature we have, a noir crossword puzzle. So it's just something for everyone. And also we accept, work from people who want to contribute. We are always open to people who want to contribute to the issue. So, and like I said, it also comes out, it's hard copy. It's a hard copy newsletter, but it's also available in electronic format. And so if you go to allthatnoir.com, you can request a sample electronic issue, and we'll send you a couple of sample issues. Anybody who wants one, just so you can look it over. And I will definitely have to put some hard copies in the mail to you so you can, see what's going on with the Dark Pages. And maybe you'll want to contribute too.
Absolutely. Well, Karen, you definitely contributed to this podcast. You bring so much knowledge to the great film Double Indemnity, and it truly is probably up there in my top 10 or 15 films. And incidentally, do you know where it sits on the AFI list? It's really high up there.
I don't. I know it has to be high, but I don't know where
15,
it is.
17, 19, 21, something like that. It's pretty high up there. I don't really talk about that list too often on this podcast because it's not necessarily about that, but it is pretty high up there, and I think most people that watch it. And I've actually sent people to that movie. In other words, people that normally will not watch black and white films. I send them to Laurel and Hardy, I send them to the Marx Brothers, and I send them to Double Indemnity.
I'll do it.
I swear to you, it's like those are the ones that go, hey, if you don't like Double Indemnity, you're not gonna like any noir. And
right, just forget it.
Yeah, if you don't like the Marx Brothers, Laurel and Hardy, you're not gonna like any comedy. You know,
right.
from black and white comedy, you're just not gonna like them. So I give up. Yeah, lost souls they are. But see, I can get away with saying that right now because anybody that's like that isn't listening to the podcast by this point. Oh, he's not talking about A Star Is Born, right? I'm out. Anyway, well, Karen, thank you very much for coming on. If I asked nicely enough, would you come on again sometime and talk about another noir?
I would absolutely love to, and I thank you so much for asking me. Like I said, I have been immersed in Double Indemnity for like the last week. It's just like nonstop. You know, it's about 3/4 of the way through right now. I love it. Yeah. And when I hang up, I'm gonna watch the rest of it. But it's just been really, really a joy because this is my favorite noir. It's been my favorite noir for what seems like decades, and so it's a real joy to get this opportunity to talk about it with somebody who seems to love it as much as I did.
It's just something in your stomach, right? That's
right. It's just something about it. It's just perfect.
Well, Karen, you obviously have it, the film in your heart. I really appreciate you very much, and I will talk to you again soon.
Okay, David. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So that is Karen Burroughs Hansberry, and I want to say thank you very much again to Karen for being a part of this podcast. And I want to say it's just amazing how much she brought as far as knowledge and wit to this podcast. It's really great, and I really appreciate Karen for what she did tonight. Well, thank you to everyone else that is listening at this point and to this fun little podcast. This is Cinema Chat, and I am David Heath. This is the podcast where we talk about the news. We don't talk about the news, the movies, and the people that made them. That's kind of funny.
You're a smart insurance man, aren't you, Mr. Neff?
Well, I've been at it 11 years.
Doing pretty well?
It's a living.
You handle just automobile insurance or all kinds?
All kinds. Fire, earthquake, theft, public liability, group insurance, industrial stuff, and so on right down the line.
Accident insurance?
Accident insurance? Sure, Mr. Davidson. What you tell me was engraved on that anklet?
Just my name.
As for instance?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, huh? I think I like that.
But you're not sure.
I'd have to drive it around the block a couple of times.
Mr. Neff, why don't you drop by tomorrow evening around 8:30? He'll be in then.
Who?
My husband. You were anxious to talk to him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, but I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.